I'm going to talk a little bit about Scottish gold. Now, gold is something that maybe a lot of people don't realize Scotland has got quite a lot of. And over the last few years, perhaps, there's been quite a lot in the press about somebody found this nugget, somebody found that nugget. And then the biggest nugget turns up and all things like that. But if going back a few years, the Hunterian did have an exhibition on gold, and we produced a book on the gold, and you can see there's a picture of the book there, and on the front cover of the book is a gold ducat of James V, and this was produced using Scottish gold, mostly from around the Lead Hills. So during that time, during the 15th, 16th centuries, most of the gold was extracted from the rocks around the Lead Hills, Wanlock Head, that kind of area. But there were also a few mines up in Aberdeen as well. Now, uh, the reason why it was so important was because uh, it gave the king legitimacy, because the king was the kind of right hand man of God, who was there to look after the treasures of the earth. And so if you didn't have any treasure in your earth, then you weren't really a very high status king. But if you had lots of gold in your land, then you became a little bit higher status. So the kings, James the fourth or fifth, I think, produced quite a lot of gold coins from the gold in the Lead Hills, and he would present these in bowls to various dignitaries to show off how much gold they had on their land, and that gave him a lot of legitimacy. But I'm not going to be talking so much about the gold from that period. I'll talk a little bit about the gold today. The price is quite good. I don't think that's particularly important, but you can see that through time, the price of gold has risen, and at the moment it's round about 54 and a half. It's maybe a little bit more at this moment, but it goes quite high. Now, the reason for that, if you look at the next graph here, is that whenever there's a banking crisis, there's always a huge increase in the value of the gold. And I'll just, if you look, for instance, in the 1930s, the European banking crisis, there was a huge increase in the value of gold. Nixon changing the reliance on the gold standard in the 1970s, that caused a huge increase in the value of gold, and then a few other banking crises since then have also show increases in the value of gold. And most recently, obviously, we've got things like, if I can, Brexit and the pandemic. The Brexit probably hasn't had any effect on gold at all, because that was very much a local environment. But the pandemic, obviously, because it's a global effect, it will have increased the price of gold. So it's on the up at the moment, but how long that's going to last, probably not very long. So where is there gold in Scotland? The easy answer to that is everywhere. Just about anywhere you go in Scotland, if you're lucky, you'll find some gold. Of course, it's not legal to just randomly go into a stream or smash up someone's property just to find a little flake of gold. But there are a few places in Scotland where you can legally go and have a look for gold, and the gold will be yours rather than belonging to the crown. And so some of these places, well, first of all, gold has been known to have come from Scotland, even probably in prehistoric times. But we don't really have very much evidence for that, because archaeologists think that a lot of the gold artifacts that they find associated with Bronze Age sites, they came from Ireland. The fact is that there's no reason why it should have come from Ireland because there was plenty of gold in Scotland anyway, so they probably manufactured them here. There's a slight differences in the style of manufacture between gold products in the Bronze Age as well. But Tacitus obviously knew about this gold and he used that as an excuse for attacking the Caledonians. Since then, 12th century, Kingdom of Fife. That was the grant was given to the Church of the Holy Trinity in the 1100s, and up at Durnesh, up in Sutherland, there's some gold that was found there as well. And also around about the same time, the first gold in Tyndrum was found as well. And of course, we all know about the gold mine at Tyndrum that apparently is no longer. So, but there was gold that was found during the excavations there as well. And the mining, most of the mining happened in the 16th, well, pretty much from the 15th century up to the 17th centuries in Crawford Muir, which is down the Lead Hills area, Aberdeenshire, and also some up in Stirlingshire. More modern ones, and certainly people are starting to prospect for gold in a variety of different places around Scotland. But then there's also the gold rushes, and there were two of them. Most people know about one of them, but they may not know about both of them. The first one was in 1852 in Fife, and the second one was in Kildonan, which is up in Sutherland, in 1869. Now, we'll start, obviously, by looking at where gold is currently found. And if you look down at the bottom part of this map, you'll see some red splodges that are pretty close to One Lick Head, and that's Crawford Muir, basically. So there's plenty of stuff around Crawford Muir. If you could look right up to Aberdeen as well, there's a fair number around Aberdeen. And if you look even further north, there's quite a lot up in Caithness and Sutherland as well, with a few bits in Stirlingshire and Perthshire as well. So that's where they are. And they're probably associated with either the big faults that you see here, the Great Glen Fault, the Highland Boundary Fault, Southern Upland Fault, but also associated with these big red blobs as well. And these big red blobs are granites of various ages, mostly quite old ones, but there are some younger ones as well. So most of the gold seems to be associated in some way with the granites. And of course, the nuggets, although on a global scale, if anybody watches Aussie gold hunters or something like that, they come out with nuggets of this size and they almost throw them away because they're not big enough. But these are the kinds of sizes of the nuggets that you would be very lucky to find in Scotland. So ones of 21 grams all the way up to 64 grams here. So, and you can see that they're from all over Scotland. They're not just in one location. So you can find reasonably sized nuggets at anywhere in Scotland, pretty much. And the gold at Crawford Muir, some of it was used to repair the crown of James V. And as I said, quite a lot of it was used for coinage as well. And there's been quite a lot written about the history of the gold mines in Scotland, this one even dating back to 1619. So there's quite a lot written almost contemporaneously with the mining in Scotland. This one was written just after the mines had closed there because the king had decided that there really wasn't enough coming out of the mines at that time. And of course, if you look at old maps, if you look at this one, for instance, quite close to Lead Hills and One Lick Head, you can see written on it things like great quantities of gold found here in 1533, and these verdant hills are stored with gold and lead, and that's a very inviting um, bit of mapping there. If anybody wanted to go there to look for gold, they would know where to look. And you can see that there's a number of Roman roads here as well. There's one just going through Elvenfoot, and there's one going off to the east there as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if the road from Elvenfoot to Lead Hills was also partly Roman as well. So I'm sure the Romans knew about the gold, although we don't have any direct evidence of this. Also, if you look at even more modern maps, you can also find some indications as to where the gold mining was. This is a map from St. Mary's Loch, and if you look there, it says gold workings disused. So there is evidence of the old gold workings on even some of the more modern maps, but these gold workings date back to the 15th and 16th centuries. Here's another one just here, not too far from there as well. So what about the gold rushes? Well, gold rushes, mostly a Victorian type of event, and mostly as a result of people, or should I say, the distance between the 1% who were making a reasonable living out of the prosperity gained through empire and industry, um, and the people who are living on the poverty line or below the poverty line. So obviously, if somebody comes to you and says, "Oh, I know where there's a lot of gold," rather than sticking it out, living in poverty, it would certainly be very attractive to people to go out into the hills to look for gold. And that's basically what was happening in California, in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and pretty much all over the world at that time. And it's not very much different to what we find today as well. A lot of people who go out looking for gold tend to be the poorer people in our society, because the rewards can be very high, but the risks are also quite high too. So the first one in 1852 was in Fife, so that's the one I'll be starting with, and the second one was 1869 up in Sutherland. The first one started actually because a convict had written a letter to his friends in Kinniswood, and he said basically in 1852 he said, I remember walking up the hills, and in the hills you used to find lumps of gold the size of your fist, and when people hear things like that, I mean, this guy was a convict in Australia. He would have known about the gold rushes in Australia. Everybody in Britain would have known about the gold rushes in Australia as well. So they would assume, oh well, he must know what he's talking about, and they all decided. It sparked a mad rush into the hills around Kinniswood, Auchtermuchty, and a number of other places to look for gold. And the poor people of Scotland downed tools, left the coal mines, and ran up into the hills around Loch Lomond, and tried to make their fortune, because obviously a life of leisure would have been a lot better than the life of toil. So they went up Bishop's Hill, some of them, and had a look in Clatteringwell Quarry. And what they found there was not so much gold as what the miners used to call fairy balls. And this is what a fairy ball looks like. Um, you can see that it does look quite golden, but there's a certain green tinge to it. And that green tinge indicates to any geologist, mineralogist, and of course jeweler, that this ain't gold at all. This is what's called pyrite. And another name for pyrite is fool's gold. So these guys were going up into the hills, and they were digging out hundreds of these little balls of pyrite and filling sacks full of them, and then dragging them back down the hill and trying to sell them to jewelers. And of course, jewelers They know the difference between gold and pyrite, and they just basically told them that they're valueless. Um, so the gold rush didn't last very long. As you might understand, there was maybe up to 800 a day, sometimes up to 2,000 people a day running around Fife trying to find this gold. And over a month, there was maybe about 20,000 people running around the hills of Fife and finding absolutely nothing. Um, However, having said that, a recent report, well, recent 1991, by the Geological Survey, they've been able to show that you can find gold in Fife after all. But if these people actually knew what they were doing rather than just downing the tools and leaving their industry to try and find gold without any experience whatsoever, I mean, there was very little chance of them knowing what they were going to find anyway. Even if they'd found a lump of gold, they wouldn't know what it was. So it probably wasn't an advisable thing for them to have done. Um, However, the gold rush up in Sutherland was a completely different affair. Now, the gold up there had been known about. There was a couple of nuggets that had been found there previously in the early 1800s. One was about 20, 30 grams in size. So, there were reasonable sized nuggets had been found there previously. And the stories were that the gold was so rich in the fields around Kildonan in Sutherland that the teeth of sheep became coated in gold. And this is a picture of a sheep's jaw with what purports to be gold. Covering some of the teeth. And of course, if any of you are dentists, you'll know that that's tartar and it's not gold at all. It's an interesting story, but the sheep's teeth were not caked in gold because of the amount of gold that's coming out of the grass up in Caithness, Sutherland. However, having said that, there was a fair amount of gold, and some people went up there who had just returned from gold mining in the gold rushes of Australia and New Zealand. And so they knew what they were doing. And they petitioned the Duke of Sutherland to say, if you let us onto the land to look for gold, maybe we'll be able to find the source for you, and that'll increase your wealth. So the Duke said, yeah, go on, see what you can find for me. So they did. And they dug all over the place where the Duke allowed them to. This is a picture from 1869 of the diggings at Kildonan Burn. Probably just above the waterfall, if you know the Kildonan Burn at all. And there's a copy of a nugget called the Sutherland Nugget that was found at that time, and that's about 60 grams. So it's a decent sized nugget. It's nearly 2 ounces, so it's quite a decent sized nugget. Um, because it was in 1869, we do have photographs of the diggings, and this is the township of Bailenor, which means the town of gold. There was another one, Caher Nam Ba, which is supposed to mean the tented city, which was on the Shushgill, which is another burn a little bit further up. The Strath from here. It certainly the Shushgill had more nuggety gold, but it was more difficult to find the gold there. The Kildonan has more flaky gold, but you can find a lot more of it. So this is a picture that was taken by Alexander Johnson, and it's a picture that's in the Johnson collection in Wick. Now, if you look close there's a colored version of it using the modern technology, just add a bit of color to it. But Alexander Johnson developed a technique of developing the photographs on site. So he didn't need to take all the plates all the way back to Wick to develop them, because if they hadn't worked, then it would have been a wasted journey. So being able to develop them on site meant that he would be able to tell whether the photograph had worked or not. So that's what he did. And just there is the wagon that he used. It was a completely enclosed wagon where he was able to develop the photographs on site. There's quite a lot else here. I have to say that there were a couple of women at least who were part of the gold mine, the mining and the gold rush as a whole. But uh, I think they were wives of some of the prospectors. And there's one story of an East Indian chap called Rossi, and he was rather picked on by the Highlanders, sadly. And there's stories of them knocking down his hut while he was having a bath, which couldn't have been very pleasant. And also an Irishman as well, who was the Highlanders were going to lynch him because he was Irish. So it wasn't a great place to live. But then neither were any of the settlements on any of the gold rushes. Really, they were pretty rough people that were involved in the gold rushes. If you look down on the right here, you can see some instruments that they would have used for the gold mining itself. The one at the top there is a long tom, and a rocker is the one on the right. And this is what they looked like when they were being used in other parts of the world. These are standard bits of kit that they would have used just about everywhere at all the gold rushes around the world. The other thing, there's this sign. An Irishman put up the sign to name the village, and the only photograph of that sign, apart from this one, where you can't actually read the sign, is one because that's the back of the sign, is one that I was able to find on eBay for a fiver, and here it is, Bailenor, which is the Irish Ers spelling of gold there, meaning the city of gold or the town of gold. Now, just to mention this chap in the bottom left here, bottom center, he's quite a distinct chap. I'll blow him up here. This is a picture of him in the gold fields, and this is a picture of him about 20, 30 years later. Both photographs taken by Alexander Johnson. The guy on the right, I know exactly who he is. His name is Donald Campbell of Leibster, and he lived from 1833 to 1911, and he was a fisherman, as well as being related in some way to the Earls of Caithness. Now, his children included Jessie Campbell, who was the mother of Daisy Campbell Graham, who was the mother of Shona Campbell Milne, who happened to be my mother. So I have a direct connection to the gold fields of Caithness. Little did I know at the start of the project, looking at gold in Scotland, that I'd find that I had a direct connection to not just someone who was prospecting for gold in the uh, the gold rush of 1869. Um, um, but you can never tell how these things might turn out. And the thing is that he obviously did not too badly. I mean, he's got a chain there that was probably gold. But sadly, it didn't pass down to my side of the family. So none of the gold that he did find, if he did find any, came down to our side of the family. Now, just to uh, come to a near end, you've all heard of the golden fleece, and this is basically you put down a sheep's fleece in the river, and the gold flakes get caught up in the fleece. and then at the end of the day, you shake the fleece down and collect all the gold. That's the basis of the golden fleece. Well, in Scotland, we did things a little bit differently. We didn't use sheep because obviously they were much too valuable. We used things like otters on Mull and on Skye. Surprisingly, they used collies. So they would skin the collies, strap the skin down into the stream, and then collect all the gold that would accumulate in their fleeces instead. So not very nice. It's not practiced anymore, I have to hasten to add. Um, what we do nowadays is use things like pans and sluices and pumps and spades. We're not allowed to use any mechanical device for extracting the gold from the streams. But we can do something called sniping. So if you ever see somebody lying face down in a stream like this, it's not because they've died and floated down the stream. It's usually because they're down there looking at the bed of the stream, and perhaps they're looking for gold. Maybe they're looking for other things, but this is called sniping. And that's the way that the largest gold nugget in Scotland was found. Um, this is a picture of the largest gold nugget in Scotland. And I don't know if you can see this holding up in my hand. This is the size, the true size of the gold nugget. It's not really that big, but it is 85 grams, which is it's a decent weight for a gold nugget. And you can see that there's quite a lot of quartz associated with it as well. So it's probably found quite close to source. So it should be possible to find the source of this gold at some point in the future. And just to prove it's gold, we did a check on what it was made of, and you can see that the bulk of it is gold with a little bit of quartz and a little bit of silver associated with it as well. Um, this is a little note of complaint, really. This was a celebration that we had. We had the World Championships of gold panning in Scotland in Moffat in 2017. Now, the World Championship of gold panning, it might not sound that great to most people, but it's something that occurs every year and happens in different parts of the world every year. But all other countries, the Americans, the Canadians, the South Africans, the Australians, the Swedes, the Finns, the Poles, all of them get funding from their government to allow them to travel around the world to compete at world class levels of gold panning. Britain got absolutely nothing. They don't get funded at all for doing this kind of thing, but every other country in the world does. But it was great because they had a walkthrough of Moffat with all the teams competing, walking through the streets of Moffat to the championships. And the championships were really good fun and very competitive. And just about every time, Britain, if not Scotland, wins at least one gold medal. And I think the world champion is a Brit at the moment as well. So the Brits are top of the game in gold panning, and yet there's absolutely no state funding for it at all. Now this, sure I can read that. I'll try and, there we go. Gold digging is only a dull chore, and no sane man will allow it to bind him and draw him away from the real blessings of existence. Now, that's a great sentiment, and it was written by one of our famed naturalists, John Muir, after a visit to the Klondike. And I always say that this is the sort of thing that a person would say if they didn't find any gold. So in 1897, John Muir visited Klondike and ended up not finding any. And he says, well, it's better to look at other things than to look for gold. So there we go. That's me for